Hey guys, happy to see y'all. Happy to be here today to read you this week's story. We have been missing you guys at church, being up in the children's area with you. I know you guys have been stuck at home, and we have been stuck at home too. And we're anxious to get back to see you all and get big hugs from everybody. But for the meantime, we are home. Tonight I'm here with Mr. Rob. He's filming for us. I've got Zane here with me. He's my grandson. And we've got Rocco and Ebony, so you might see them pass through as we're doing our video. But our story is about trusting God in uncertain situations. Right now, you know, we're having to trust God in a very uncertain situation. The whole pandemic, being at home, wearing masks, not get to see our friends. It's really strange. We don't know what's going on, but we know that God has a plan, and if we trust Him and just follow that plan, that everything's going to be okay. And that's what our story's about tonight. It's about Joshua and the Battle of Jericho and how they followed God's plan when it didn't make any sense at all. So I'm going to read that to you, okay? Let me read it to you?
Yeah.
It's called The Warrior Leader, and it comes from Joshua 3 and 6. After Moses died, God gave his people a new leader. His name was Joshua, which means the Lord saves. Joshua was going to lead God's people into the special land God had promised to give them. By this time, God's people had been wandering around in that baking desert for 40 years. It's a long time, Zane. So you can imagine how sick they were of sand and of anything yellow and tents and walking and being sweaty and being hot. You're right. And how happy they were to reach the edge of the desert and see their beautiful new home right there in front of them, all cool and green and lovely. There was only one problem.
What problem?
It was Jericho.
What Jericho?
Jericho was a city, but it wasn't just any old city.
What Jericho?
It was Jericho's the bad guys.
Jericho was the bad guys?
Yes. It was a fortress, and it stopped anyone from getting into the land. See it? The people looked at Jericho, at the big, giant, scary walls around it, at the tall, towering ramparts, at heavy iron gates bolted shut, at each other.
I'm scared.
You're scared? You don't have to be scared. Remember, we said God was in control, right?
I'm scared.
Yeah, let's see what happens. What would they do? No one knew, but God knew, and God told Joshua what to do. But Joshua must have looked surprised, because it was a very odd battle plan indeed, as we'll soon find out. Then God made his people a promise. I will always be with you. I will never ever leave you. If you do what I say, your lives in the new land will be happy and everything will go well. So Joshua gathered his army together. They had their swords and their spears and their shields. They were ready to fight. But the plan wasn't about fighting. It was about trusting and doing what God said. Joshua's army went marching, marching, marching around the city, day after day after day. They're too scared to fight, the people in Jericho said. But they were wrong. God's people weren't scared. They were waiting. Waiting for God to tell them what to do next. On the seventh day, God told his people to march around the city not once, but 7 times. Then God told everyone to make as much noise as they could. Has anyone ever told you to make as much noise as you can?
Jericho looks like dairy.
Yeah. I bet your mom and dad aren't telling you right now, please be as loud as you can, right, when you're home with them. I bet they're not saying that. Well, imagine you could, and imagine that noise. Add 39,999 other people making that noise too. You get the idea. Ear splitting. As it turned out, stone splitting too, because the huge, strong walls of Jericho just crumbled to the ground as if they were made out of sand. Jericho vanished in a great cloud of dust. And so it was that God's people entered their new home. And they didn't have to fight to get in. They only had to walk. Joshua said, God has brought you safely here. Now will you do what he says? Everyone said, we promise. Only God can make your heart happy, Joshua said. So don't pray to pretend gods. No, they said never. I'm afraid they didn't keep their promise. They didn't do what God said, and many years later, just as God warned them, things would go badly for God's people. They would lose their home. Enemies would capture them and take them off as slaves, and God's people would scatter into many different lands. But God's plan was still working. One day, He would give His people another leader and another home. But this home, no one could ever take from them. Is that a good story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't have to be afraid at all, did they?
I want to be all done with the story.
We're going to be all done with the story. In just a second, I'm going to talk to these folks one more time, okay? Thank you guys for listening to my story and hanging out with Zane and I tonight and Mr. Rob. Again, we miss y'all. And just remember, no matter what it seems like right now, God is in control. He has a plan, and He's going to take care of us. We love you. Mwah. We'll see you soon.